Imagine the scene. It is October 16th, 1966, at McMurdo Station, Antarctica, a landscape of absolute biological exclusion where the temperature sits at 40 degrees below zero. The air is a freezing blade, and the ground is an unforgiving expanse of blue glacial ice. Our main character is Captain William Bill J. Vance, a 44-year-old veteran pilot with over 8,000 hours of heavy transport command. Visualize Vance, a man of rigid technical discipline, checking his flight logs inside the heated cockpit of a Lockheed 121 Fairchild Constellation, designated as Pegasus. Beside him are 79 passengers and 11 crew members, scientists and military personnel, returning to the frozen continent for Operation Deep Freeze. The power dynamic on the aircraft is a circuit of absolute trust in aviation mechanics. The mission is critical. Execute a routine high-stakes supply flight from Christchurch, New Zealand, to the ice runway at McMurdo. This is the primary behavioral data point, an experienced crew flying into a territory where a single mechanical failure means instant thermal deletion. At exactly midnight, the four massive radial engines roar to life, and the silver aircraft descends into the pitch-black southern sky. The archive is open. The timeline of the total environmental sabotage of the Pegasus flight begins as the last lights of civilization fade into the dark sea. Technical density expansion. The Lockheed C-121 featured an advanced weather radar system and a maximum takeoff weight of 145,000 pounds. At the time of departure, the barometric pressure at McMurdo was reported as stable, but a silent meteorological anomaly was already forming over the Ross Ice Shelf, preparing an atmospheric trap that would eliminate any possibility of a safe return. The aircraft progresses continuously for 7 hours over the freezing Southern Ocean, approaching the frozen runway. By 7:30 a.m., Flight Pegasus reaches its point of safe return, the technical coordinate where the fuel onboard drops to a level where a plane can no longer return to New Zealand. Once you cross this invisible line, you are locked into the Antarctic grid. This is the moment of technical fracture. Suddenly, the weather conditions at McMurdo Station suffer a catastrophic shift, a localized whiteout storm hitting the runway with winds exceeding 75 knots. Imagine the intense expressions of the navigators as the ground radar goes completely blind, obscured by a wall of blowing ice crystals. The radio crackles as the tower at McMurdo transmits a severe warning: visibility 0, landing impossible. Captain Vance is caught in a lethal trap. He cannot fly back to New Zealand. His fuel tanks are mathematically depleted past the point of return. The power dynamic shifts entirely to a mechanical battle against a shrinking fuel gauge. The plane is now a flying prison, suspended over a desert of ice, searching for tracer runway that has been completely deleted by the wind. Technical density expansion. The point of safe return, PSR calculation for the C-121 was based on a constant fuel burn rate of 400 gallons per hour. The sudden wind shift from the south introduced an unexpected 40-knot headwind, accelerating the fuel deletion and narrowing the survival window to less than 90 minutes of flight time before complete engine starvation. The clock moves toward 9:15 a.m. The Constellation is circling in a world of absolute whiteness, where the horizon has been erased, and there is no distinction between the sky and the ground. This is the phenomenon of spatial disorientation, a sensory sabotage that fools the human equilibrium. Imagine Captain Vance gripping the control yoke, his eyes locked onto his altimeter as the plane drops through 10,000 feet. The ground controllers at McMurdo try a desperate tactical intervention, utilizing a ground-controlled approach, GCA radar to guide the blind aircraft through the storm via audio commands. But the blowing ice creates massive static interference, a messy and unsolved chaos of noise on the radio frequency. The crew can hear the engine cylinders firing rhythmically, unaware that their fuel is down to the final gallons. Vance knows that a standard landing is out of the question. He must execute a blind, unassisted descent onto a surface he cannot see. The power dynamic between human sight and instruments is completely broken. Every second of the descent is a mechanical race against a catastrophic structural collision. Technical density expansion. Spatial disorientation occurs when the inner ear's vestibular system is sabotaged by the lack of a visual horizon, inducing false sensations of banking or climbing. The GCA radar system utilized an N/MP1 unit, which suffered from severe signal attenuation due to the extreme density of the airborne ice crystals, dropping the precision tracking capability by 60%. At exactly 9:45 a.m., the timeline of Flight Pegasus intersects with the physical reality of the Ross Ice Shelf. The plane is flying at 130 knots when the right wing tip clips a massive snow drift, hidden in the whiteout. The impact is a violent kinetic shock that rips the engine mounts from the wing structure. Imagine the sound of screaming metal as the 5-ton aircraft slams onto the hard, blue glacial ice, skidding uncontrollably at high velocity. The nose gear collapses instantly, and the fuselage begins to spin, a giant silver cylinder sliding through a wall of ice. This is the mechanics of destruction. The friction generates intense heat, melting the ice beneath the belly as the plane breaks apart. The left wing is sheared off completely, venting high-octane fuel across the white landscape. But imagine the miracle of the engineering. The passenger cabin, built with reinforced structural ribs, remains intact as the wreckage finally slides to a stop in a massive plume of snow. The roar of the engines is replaced by the whistle of the 70-knot wind, and the groans of 90 human beings trapped inside a broken metal hull at 40 below zero. Technical density expansion. The deceleration force during the initial impact was measured at 12 g along the lateral axis. The aircraft skidded for over 800 yards across the ice shelf, a surface with a friction coefficient of less than 0.1, which prevented a catastrophic instant roll and allowed the kinetic energy to dissipate gradually over a 40-second interval, saving the lives of everyone on board. The investigation by the Navy and the Civil Aeronautics Board begins while the wreckage is still buried in snow. The primary technical artifact is the fuselage itself, frozen solid within hours of the crash. Imagine the recovery teams moving through the blinding gale, digging out the survivors from a hull that had become an instant deep freeze chamber. This is a clinical study in human endurance. Miraculously, out of the 90 occupants on board, there are 0 fatalities. The forensic audit attributes this total survival rate to Captain Vance's precise control during the blind descent and the immense structural integrity of the Lockheed design. The survivors are evacuated to the heated shelters of McMurdo Station, but the aircraft is left behind on the ice shelf, a permanent monument to an atmospheric ambush. The plane was declared a total hull loss, its electronics and mechanical systems permanently deleted by the extreme cold. We analyze this case as a rare instance where the engineering of the machine held the line against the total exclusion of the environment. Technical density expansion. Hypothermia protocol was initiated immediately upon the arrival of the rescue teams, as the internal temperature of the cabin had dropped to -20 Celsius within 15 minutes of the engine shutdown. The structural analysis of the aluminum-clad fuselage showed that the main spar absorbed 80% of the vertical impact force, preventing a catastrophic hull compression. The subsequent technical report focused heavily on the meteorological data that preceded the flight. The investigation revealed a severe informational sabotage. The weather satellite images available to the controllers in Christchurch had failed to capture the low-pressure system forming behind Mount Erebus. This was an optical void. The storm was a micro-cyclonic surge, a violent weather system that develops in minutes under the influence of the Antarctic mountains. The pilots were flying with a data trail that was already obsolete by the time they crossed the point of safe return. We analyze this as a classic breakdown of environmental forecasting in high-consequence zones. The automated weather stations on the ice shelf had been buried by snow weeks prior, deleting the real-time ground telemetry that could have saved the flight from the trap. The Pegasus dossier proves that in Antarctica, the environment is an active adversary that can rewrite the parameters of a flight plan faster than a computer can process the data. Technical density expansion. The micro-cyclonic system generated a localized barometric drop of 15 millibars in 30 minutes, inducing a pressure gradient wind that accelerated the velocity of the snowdrift. The lack of active radiosonde data from the interior of the continent created a systemic blind spot in the Navy's weather forecasting algorithms, leading directly to the false clearance given to the Pegasus crew. The wreckage of the Pegasus was never removed from the ice shelf. The logistics of moving a 90-ton metal frame across a crevassed landscape were technically impossible. Instead, it became a legendary landmark on the White Continent, known to generations of researchers as the Pegasus wreck. Imagine the scene over the decades as the snow slowly covers the silver fuselage, turning it into a ghost ship of the ice. The plane remained in a state of perfect preservation, its paint and structure protected from rust by the absolute lack of moisture in the polar air. This is a unique forensic rastro, a machine that has been deleted from service but preserved by the very environment that destroyed it. In the late 20th century, the shifting ice shelf began to move the wreck toward the sea at a rate of several meters per year, a slow mechanical conveyor belt that will eventually dump the silver constellation into the depths of the Southern Ocean, a final, total deletion of the artifact. Technical density expansion. Glaciological surveys indicate the Ross Ice Shelf moves at a velocity of approximately 150 meters per year at the Pegasus coordinates. The mechanical stress of the moving ice has begun to deform the remaining spar structure, creating a localized stress fracture pattern that will cause the fuselage to disintegrate before it reaches the calving edge of the shelf. The final minute-by-minute forensic reconstruction of Dossier 26 ends here. 90 lives saved by precision piloting and structural engineering, leaving a silver ghost buried in the Antarctic ice as a warning about the fragility of our technical grids. The trace left by Flight Pegasus is a lesson in the severe power of environmental sabotage and the absolute necessity of reliable data in the polar zones. The biological facts are immutable: a plane blind in a whiteout, a crew that trusted their instruments to the end, and a mechanical platform that refused to break. The frozen runway remains a cornerstone study in extreme weather aviation and structural survival metrics. Your mind is the final piece of this investigation. Join our community of investigators by clicking the subscribe button. Help us track the traces that the white silence tries to hide. I am your guide through the darkness, and I will return with a new dossier very soon. Keep your mind sharp. Focus on the facts with your eyes closed. And remember, the ice never forgets, and every evidence counts. This is Mind 74, and we are the keepers of the cold files. The investigation is suspended, but the file remains open. Until next time. Technical density expansion. The Pegasus runway was officially closed in 2014 due to shifting ice dynamics, replaced by the Phoenix airfield. The original C-121 flight manual and the Navy's investigative report remain core training text for polar logistics crews, serving as the definitive case study on the management of fuel-critical states in absolute geographic isolation.